America will build a wall on the Mexican border, says President Trump, as he prepares to unveil plans to bolster national security. He's expected to set in motion his election pledge to build the 2,000-mile-long wall and explain how it will be paid for. And it's understood he'll sign executive orders to restrict immigration and impose tougher visa regulations on a number of mainly Muslim countries. We'll have the latest from Washington and from Mexico, also on the programme this lunchtime.
I can confirm to the House that our plan will be set out in a white paper published this House.
A climb down for the Prime Minister as Theresa May says she will publish her Brexit plan for Parliament's scrutiny. High heels, makeup and revealing clothes. Women are experiencing widespread discrimination when it comes to dress codes at work, say MPs.
Which one's yours?
We report on the rise of the counterfeit industry in China. Fakes that are so good, even the Lego boss can't tell the difference.
This is Lego.
This is Lego, bought from Toys R Us yesterday.
You're telling me?
Built by my daughter. It's not real. It's not Lego. It's trying to be Lego, is my assessment of it.
Out of Vogue after 25 years at the helm, the editor of British Vogue, Alexandra Shulman, says she is stepping down.
Here in the south, Wayne Moores was killed in a hit and run. His family say penalties for drunk drivers don't go far enough. And the 20-year-old from Surrey accused of trying to assassinate Donald Trump will be released from prison in May.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Donald Trump is promising a big day on national security today as he makes good on his pre-election promises to crack down on immigration and tighten internal security. He's expected to give details of how America will build its wall along the border with Mexico. He's also expected to halve the number of refugees allowed into the US and tighten visa controls on visitors from a number of predominantly Muslim countries. Opponents have reacted with alarm to the plans, as David Willis now reports from Washington.
We're going to have our borders nice and strong. We're going to build the wall.
Build a wall.
We're going to build a wall.
We have to build a wall, folks.
It was the soundtrack to Donald Trump's unorthodox campaign for president, a call to build a wall along America's southern border with Mexico. Now he seems set to press ahead with measures he believes are vital to stemming the illegal flow of immigrants into the United States. The president on his Twitter account said simply, "Big day planned on national security tomorrow. Among many other things, we will build the wall." He's vowed to make Mexico pay for it, what's more, although the Mexican government has refused to do so.
We recognise
that the United States has the right to build a wall, even though we don't like it. But it's another thing to try and get a neighbouring country to pay for its construction. We have said many times that this is unacceptable. It's the clear position of the Mexican government and the Mexican people.
Later in the week, to round off a busy start to his presidency, Mr. Trump is expected to sign executive orders closing America's borders to refugees and limiting access to citizens from 7 African and Middle Eastern countries the administration believes export terrorism. They're mainly Muslim countries, but the mantra of the Trump administration is America first. A country that traditionally has opened its doors to immigrants is about to head in the opposite direction. David Willis, BBC News, Washington.
Well, in a moment, we'll talk to our correspondent in Washington. But first, let's go to Will Grant in Mexico City. The big question is how this wall is going to be paid for.
Well, there is a lot, Sophie, that Mexicans may disagree about it, but if there's one thing that they can rally around, it's their hatred, their complete rejection of this wall. Everybody from the top politicians to workers in car factories, in car plants up and down the country, to ordinary people everywhere in this country reject this idea and are clear that Mexico will not pay for it. That's what they say. This is also having a great impact on the popularity of the president here, Enrique Peña Nieto, who is, of course, due to meet Mr. Trump in Washington, D.C. on the 31st. It has really hit him hard. He is currently facing the lowest popularity figures of any Mexican president for 2 decades, and it's his handling of this particular issue that has hurt him so hard. But as far as Mexicans are concerned, they simply will not be paying for this, either before the event or afterwards, in the terms of remittances, some kind of control of taxes. Whatever it is that Mr. Trump is proposing, he can be very sure that Mexicans will oppose it.
Well, thank you. And we can also speak to our correspondent in Washington, Gary O'Donoghue. And President Trump has promised a lot more detail on national security, but he's also said that he will have more detail on an investigation that he has announced he's going to launch this morning into voter fraud.
Yeah, it's interesting. Donald Trump won the election here fair and square under the rules of the Constitution, won 33 states, 306 electoral votes, but he didn't win the popular vote. Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than him countrywide, and he doesn't like it. He doesn't like it one bit. Several times he said that there's been voter fraud. He's now announced this investigation. There is no evidence of voter fraud on anything like that scale. And I think his aides will be pulling their hair out this morning, because this kind of thing is likely to overshadow what should be a very big day for him in terms of fulfilling one of his promises, the wall, plus those other measures on immigration. We're looking at a potential temporary ban on refugees coming into the United States. 85,000 came in last year, so that's going to have a huge impact worldwide. And again, these huge visa restrictions on 7 countries from North Africa and the Middle East, pending the imposition of what they're going to call in the long term extreme vetting. That could all be subject to legal challenge, particularly because they're predominantly Muslim countries, and the lawyers could say, look, this is discriminating on religious grounds, and that's unconstitutional.
Gary O'Donoghue in Washington, Will Grant in Mexico City. Thank you both. And you can see more analysis of these first days of the Trump presidency tonight on 100 Days with Catty Kay in Washington and Christian Fraser in London. That's at 7 o'clock on the BBC News Channel. The Prime Minister has backed down in the Commons after pressure to publish the government's plans on how the UK will leave the European Union. Theresa May now says the government will publish a formal white paper on Brexit for Parliament scrutiny. Theresa May had been under pressure from Labour MPs and a number of Conservatives to produce a policy document. It will be separate from the legislation MPs will vote on, which will trigger the process of leaving the EU. Here's our political correspondent, Carol Walker.
Off to the Commons.
Are you worried about defeat, Prime Minister?
Yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled against the Prime Minister, forcing her to consult Parliament before starting formal Brexit negotiations. That wasn't enough for some MPs who complained about the lack of a clear vision of the government's plans.
Order! Questions to the Prime Minister!
But today, she sought to seize the initiative with an unexpected announcement.
I can confirm to the House that our plan will be set out in a white paper published this House.
A white paper formally setting out the government's approach was a central demand of the opposition, and the Labour leader struggled to rethink his attack.
Could we know when this white paper is going to be available to us? And why it's taken so long to get it?
Theresa May said the timing was less important than negotiating a good deal.
He and others asked for a white paper. I've been clear there will be a white paper. But what I'm also clear about is that the right honourable gentleman always asks about process, about the means to the end. I and this government are focusing on the outcomes. We're focusing...
Jeremy Corbyn was concerned that the promise to protect the competitiveness of the economy would mean cutting taxes on big business.
Will she offer some clarity and some certainty and withdraw the threats to destroy the social structure of this country by turning us into the bargain basement she clearly threatens?
Tomorrow, the government will publish the bill to get Parliament's approval for starting the formal Brexit negotiations. Ministers are confident they can get it through without significant setbacks, but some long and complex battles lie ahead. Carol Walker, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's speak to our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, who's in Westminster. How big a climb down is this for the Prime Minister?
Well, make no mistake, it is a climb down because Downing Street have repeatedly rebuffed the idea of publishing a white paper. In fact, I was speaking to some of Mrs May's people only this morning and they said, no, we're not going to publish a white paper because if we give MPs that, they'll simply move on to demanding something else. Lo and behold, in the Commons, Mrs May gets up and says, we are going to publish. But it strikes me as quite a crafty climb down because politically this is a concession Mrs May perhaps was always planning to make because governments almost always publish a white paper before they go into negotiations about other EU treaties. So she may always have intended to do this. And you sense that for many Conservatives this will keep them on board because there were a group of Tory MPs who were poised to side with opposition politicians to vote against Mrs May and demand that white paper. So she's diffused that. More than that, she rather wrong-footed Jeremy Corbyn, who was lined up in the Commons to ask a whole load of critical questions, you think, about that white paper, and he was left somewhat trying to find his way. So yes, it's a climb down, but it's quite a clever climb down, and one which Mrs May always have intended to make. One other thing to say, Sophie, in the last few minutes we've been told by Downing Street that the bill to trigger Article 50 will be published tomorrow, and that is going to be the next focus of possible argy-bargy over Brexit as MPs look at that and decide what sort of amendments they want to table. So that is going to be the next big bust-up over Brexit.
Norman Smith in Westminster, thank you. A man has been arrested in connection with alleged threats against the campaigner Gina Miller, who led the Brexit court case against the government. The 50-year-old man was arrested in London's Knightsbridge this morning. Our legal correspondent Clive Coleman is here. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, officers from the Met's anti-cybercrime unit, it's called Operation Falcon, this morning arrested this 50-year-old man, as you say, in Knightsbridge in London on suspicion of racially aggravated malicious communication. Now, the arrest is in connection with a complaint that was made on the 6th of November by Gina Miller. Just remind people, yet again, she's the woman who successfully challenged the government's plans to trigger Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty without an Act of Parliament. She won her case at the Supreme Court yesterday. Now, her complaint relates to threats that were made online and a second unrelated comment believed to have been made by the same suspect in August 2016. The arrested man is currently in custody at a central London police station. But as part of the same investigation, we're told that the police have issued 8 cease and desist notices to various individuals around the UK. Now, they do what they say on the tin. These are notices saying if you don't stop the behaviour you're involved with, then that could lead to police action. Speaking to me in December, following the Supreme Court hearing, Gina Miller outlined the general nature of the threats that she's faced.
They are quite vile. The sexual violence is very vile, and I wouldn't like to say, but anything you could probably imagine is what I've been threatened with. But then there have been particular death threats about slitting my throat or beheading me or whatever it is.
Now, today's arrest is separate from the arrest by officers from the same Met unit in early December, actually during the Supreme Court hearing itself, of a 55-year-old man in Swindon on suspicion of the same offence. He was released on bail.
Clive Coleman, thank you. David Cameron has called for more funding for dementia research as he revealed that he is the new president of the charity Alzheimer's Research UK. The former Prime Minister says the focus on Alzheimer's research lags too far behind that of cancer and strokes. Mr Cameron says he wants to win the battle of priorities because dementia shouldn't be written off as an inevitability of later life. The laws which ban sexist dress rules at work aren't being enforced properly. That's according to a group of MPs. It follows the case of a woman who was sent home from her job at an accountancy firm for not wearing high-heel shoes, while the same company had no dress code for men. When MPs began to investigate the story, they say they were inundated with complaints from women with similar experiences. Simon Gompertz has more.
The receptionist who wouldn't give in. Nicola Thorpe refused to wear heels between 2 and 4 inches high. She kept her flat shoes on, was sent home without pay, and now MPs have taken up her cause.
The report is great because it doesn't just focus on high heels. This was never just about a pair of shoes. It's about how women are viewed in the workplace, that there's so much pressure on women to not just look professional, but to look attractive.
MPs heard from hundreds of women who said they'd hurt their backs, were in crippling pain and thought being forced to wear heels was sexist. So now there's a call for awareness campaigns and bigger fines for employers.
It's just common sense, isn't it? If people use their common sense, and I'm really pleased that most people, there are a lot of people wearing flat shoes now, which is the fashion, and that's what it should be. You shouldn't have to totter around in high heels if you don't want to.
Dress codes at work have to comply with health and safety regulation to reduce the risk of injury and with the Equality Act, which bans discrimination. And while there are likely to be differences between the way men and women present themselves, what's required should be reasonable. And that applies to hair and makeup too.
The government says that what happened to Nicola Thorpe over high heels was unlawful. But MPs have found that the pressure on women is widespread and most would like to see something done about it.
So you're wearing high heels?
Yeah.
Have you been forced?
Definitely not. I think looking smart and for a corporate image is very subjective, and wearing flat shoes doesn't necessarily make you look not smart.
If I feel comfortable wearing heels, I will, but if I don't, then I don't have to. I don't think I have to. It shouldn't be a compulsory thing.
I think there is a feeling that wearing high heels is more feminine, that it's smarter. I've never been told to wear heels, but
If you were, what would you do?
Oh, I'd be very, very put off by working for that company.
The campaign over high heels has highlighted the tyranny some women feel subjected to over their appearance. MPs are saying more still needs to be done to make sure they can step into work in the shoes they choose. Simon Gompertz, BBC News.
The time is just after 1:15, our top story this lunchtime. Donald Trump is to unveil his plans to build a wall with Mexico, stop refugees entering the US and tighten visa controls with predominantly Muslim countries. And still to come as the cold snap continues, reports of a sharp rise in the number of people sleeping rough on England's streets.
And coming up on South today, all eyes on Anfield. Can Saints build on Saturday's victory for the second leg of their League Cup semi-final? And trapped in the ice, days of sub-zero temperatures that's led to this canal freezing over.
China may be one of the world's biggest producers of many of the things we buy, but it's also gaining a reputation as one of the world's biggest producers of fake goods. Some of the most famous high street brands are losing out on billions of pounds in trade because of counterfeiters. Their merchandise is often so good, it's impossible to tell the difference between what's real and what's not, as our correspondent in Beijing, Robin Brandt, found out when he went to speak to the boss of the toy maker, Lego.
Billions and billions of these little plastic bricks have been sold the world over. And now Lego is betting big on China. What started out with hand-cut bricks in Denmark in 1949 is now a $100 million state-of-the-art operation near Shanghai. But they're not the only ones doing it.
Is this the Lego or Lego?
Copies like this and fakes or counterfeits are prolific in China. Lego is currently suing the firm behind this copycat Star Wars model. So, how easy is it to spot the difference? We bought a real one and a copycat and asked the experts.
这个东西我觉得我看不，说实话我看不出来真假。这个是真的，这是真的。If you have to ask me to guess, I say this one maybe.
Which one do you think is real?
You think this one is real?
You're right. The truth is, they look and feel almost identical. The copy's so good, in fact, that even the boss of that huge new Lego factory can't tell. Have a little look at that for me. Just from there, what do you think of that?
It looks like a minifigure to me.
What do you think of him? Two men. Which one's yours? Just have a guess for me.
I would say this is Lego. This is not.
Okay. This is Lego.
No, this is Lego.
This is Lego. Bought from Toys R Us yesterday.
You're telling me?
Built by my daughter. It's not real. It's not Lego.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to be Lego, is my assessment of it. Lego's not the only foreign firm investing big in China but having trouble with local copycats. Land Rovers are now made here. White Evokes like this sell particularly well. But the British firm has been powerless to stop this. Tucked away on a Shanghai side street, this is a Land Wind. It's similar on the inside, very, very similar on the outside, but a lot cheaper. This is our copycat that caught people out. You can buy him and the real thing on the huge online retailer Alibaba. They took down thousands of links to copycat Lego products last year alone. But the toy maker is still pursuing manufacturers in the courts because even the boss can't tell the difference. Robin Brandt, BBC News, Shanghai.
There's been a big increase in the number of people sleeping rough, with more than half the councils in England recording a rise. Overall, more than 4,000 people a night were sleeping rough last year. That's a 16% increase on the year before. The homelessness charity Crisis says the numbers are going up at an appalling rate. From Birmingham, Seema Katecha sent this report.
As the darkness creeps in, the wind chill begins to bite. Those who have nowhere to go look for shelter. With outreach worker Paul, we come across Bob, who's been living on the streets for months.
Well, I'm used to being alone on my life, but sometimes, like a bit of company, to talk to. I did have some people who used to come and sit here and talk to at night, and can't get me down about 10:30, and that's where you go.
You're smiling?
Yeah, I've got virtually everything I need.
The number of rough sleepers in England has increased by 16% over the last year. Local authority counts and estimates show that in autumn 2015 there were 3,569 rough sleepers, but counts carried out in November last year show that the number has risen to 4,134. Well, as we were walking by, Paul just stopped to check up on this rough sleeper over here. He said that he was in a lot of pain. He said that he'd actually been assaulted in the night. So Paul called the paramedics and they're just making sure that he's okay. We think that they're probably going to have to take him to the hospital because it seems like there's something seriously wrong with him. We were told he was discharged later that day. Some charities blame council cuts for putting more vulnerable people on the streets. Local authority budgets have been reduced by around 20% over the last 6 years, which they say have led to fewer support services.
Homelessness is affected by austerity, the cuts that have come down from nationally, the cuts to the NHS, local authorities, and also those in terms of benefit caps. That has a huge impact on why people are on the streets. Birmingham City Council are doing a lot to try to reduce this by partnership work. We're working with key agencies, we're doing outreach, surgeries, and we're actually listening to rough sleepers.
The government says by 2020 it will have invested more than £500 million on tackling homelessness. But with a further squeeze on council spending expected in April, there are concerns that hostels and shelters could be closed down, forcing more people to live rough. Seema Katecha, BBC News, Birmingham.
4 school children, all under the age of 13, have been taken to hospital after it's thought they mistakenly ate cocaine, thinking it was sherbet. It happened at Broadston Middle School near Poole in Dorset. Our correspondent Duncan Kennedy is there. Duncan.
Yes, Sophie, a strange and potentially very disturbing incident. It happened on January the 3rd, although it's only just come to light. And what seems to have happened, judging from what the police and the head teacher are saying, is that a pupil has turned up at the school here, we don't know how old he or she is, with some white powder. 3 other children then become involved. They all think it's sweets, possibly sherbet, but for some reason the alarm is raised. The police are called to the school here, so too our South West ambulance. They turn up and check the children over. The children are sent to hospital as a precaution. They're given a check over and sent home, and the police say that there's no suggestion that the children ingested anything. But the police are confirming that this was cocaine. We've got no more further details than that. What the head teacher is saying, Dawn Wilkes, is that we would like to reassure parents that this incident was dealt with swiftly and in line with our policies. She goes on to say police inquiries are ongoing regarding this incident, and as such we're unable to comment any further. So far as Dorset Police, all they're saying is that a 32-year-old man has been arrested on drugs offences. He's been bailed to appear again in February, and their inquiries are continuing. No further details at the moment, but those 4 children involved, they're said to be safe and well, didn't ingest anything, although it has been confirmed that this was cocaine.
Duncan, thank you. Women MPs say they are experiencing unprecedented levels of verbal and online abuse. Around 2/3 said they felt less safe following the murder of the Labour MP Jo Cox last summer. Some reported death threats, with more than half of those questioned by the BBC saying they had had physical threats. Our political correspondent Ellie Price has more.
It gives me the greatest pleasure to introduce to you the new National Unionist women members.
It took a long time to get women into Parliament. The first female MP to take her seat, Nancy Astor, was elected 98 years ago. Eventually, more would follow. They fought and died to get representation in Parliament. But now modern women MPs face their own struggle.
Right, so what you're looking at are tweets, the abusive tweets that my team screenshotted.
Anne McLaughlin MP won't read the abuse she receives online, which is just as well. It's deeply personal. She doesn't really want to share it.
It takes a lot of strength not to. It's very tempting if you're alone at night and nobody can see you, if you get upset and you cry, to just have a look. But why would I do that to myself?
But it's not just hurtful insults on social media. There's an even darker side of death threats and violence. Jo Cox was murdered outside her constituency surgery last June. Such threats are of course faced by male members of Parliament too. But 2/3 of the female MPs we spoke to say they felt less safe ever since, and well over half have received a physical threat from a member of the public.
I've had death threats towards myself and my family, one of which the police are investigating, and one where an extremely graphic image of a beheaded corpse was sent to me with the threat that, for the life of myself and my family, and I have young children, so I took that extremely seriously.
This is the room where I hold my surgeries. That's where.
Tulip Sadiq, begrudgingly, now makes sure she has security whenever she holds constituency surgeries. You feel safer now?
Well, this building is a secure building. There's police presence outside. The staff are very supportive. So I do feel safer here.
It all paints rather a grim picture, and certainly the majority of MPs we spoke to say they're concerned that hearing about this sort of abuse might put off good new people, good new women, from wanting to become MPs. In fact, 1/3 of those we heard from said they'd considered giving up their job here in Parliament because of it. And yet, none have. And the majority we heard from say, despite the difficulties, the job is a privilege and well worth the flack. Ellie Price, BBC News, Westminster.
She's the editor who persuaded the Duchess of Cambridge to appear on the front of the centenary edition of Vogue. But today, Alexandra Schulman has said she is stepping down from the job as editor-in-chief. She's been in charge for a quarter of a century, but she said she now wanted to experience a different life. David Sillito reports.
In the world of high fashion and the catwalk show, you know where you stand by where you sit. And for 25 years, the front row seat of British fashion has been Alexandra Schulman's. In a world in which it's all about what's new, she has been a constant figure in an era in which British fashion blossomed with names such as John Galliano, Stella McCartney and Alexander McQueen.
No, I think the white's the problem. Yeah, I mean, that's quite nice.
And while British Vogue, which has just celebrated its 100th anniversary, still sits at the top of the fashion prestige list, it's been a torrid time in the magazine business. Online now offers many alternative ways for people to get their fashion fix. It's always unnerving then when someone with a reputation for knowing what works goes. But what's also gone is a fashion editor who never really seemed like a typical fashion editor. Calm, reserved. A recent documentary wondered why, in a world of high emotion, she seemed to be immune to fashion's high anxiety.
You don't seem like someone who would carry much stress with you, though.
No, I know. It's amazing that, isn't it? I've never seemed like somebody who carries stress with me.
But you do?
Yeah.
20 years ago, she had faced criticism in an era of so-called heroin chic of super skinny models. By the end, she was questioning designers why fashion clothes had to be so tiny. And unlike other editors, her personal style wasn't controlled by the dictates of fashion. She rather stood out for being strangely normal. David Siletto, BBC News.
Time now for a look at the weather with Chris Fawkes. Hello.
Hi Sophie, and finally, it's the last of our foggy days. Yes, the murky weather once again causing a few issues at the airports and tricky travelling conditions on the roads. The murky skies there captured by one of our weather watchers, Keith Butch, in Cambridgeshire. The early morning mist, though, clearing out of the Trent Valley to reveal some beautifully sunny skies in Nottinghamshire. And it's one of those days where, again, we've got a big mixture of weather. There's the murky weather covering much of central and eastern England, a slice of sunshine for north and west England and Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland staying mainly cloudy. Now, we are seeing visibility generally picking up very slowly across eastern counties of England. It will stay quite misty through the rest of this afternoon, but the fog, once it's gone, is going to stay gone, which is good news. For Western England and Wales, plenty of sunshine, a fine afternoon as well for northern counties of England. Northern Ireland pretty cloudy, a few showers possible scraping into western counties. There'll be some rain working into the Western Isles. Very mild though in the Highlands. Temperatures here up to 13 degrees, would you believe it? Now, overnight tonight, the winds will be picking up and we'll see cloudy skies spreading across much of the country. With the cloud, we could well have a little bit of hill fog up over the tops of the Pennines and maybe a few spots of drizzle, perhaps even a few snowflakes falling out of the cloud. It will be another cold one for England and Wales, even in Scotland with clearing skies, a touch of frost possible, but Northern Ireland stays frost-free. Now, the coldest weather overnight, again in the countryside, -4, -5 degrees across parts of England and Wales, maybe a -6 if those skies stay clear for any length of time in northern Scotland. Here's a picture through Thursday. We start the day with a lot of cloud, again thick enough for a bit of drizzle, a few flakes of snow possible, not amounting to much, and the skies will try to brighten up through the day. But it's these brisk winds dragging in some cold continental air that you'll notice the most for tomorrow, because it's going to make the weather feel like it is below freezing in places. Now, heading on into Friday, there's a subtle change in where the winds are coming from. They're going to start coming up from the Bay of Biscay, so it's a milder kind of direction. A slow process, but eventually, across western and southern areas, we should see those temperatures rising. A lot of cloud around, bit of rain in the west. Temperature-wise, we're looking at highs of around 9 degrees in Cardiff and London, and maybe a 10 towards Plymouth, but still cold for Scotland and northeast England. Now, looking at the weather prospects into the weekend, it's a mixed bag, to be honest. On Saturday, it stays quite unsettled. We're looking at some heavy showers, and some of those could well fall as snow up over the high grounds of Scotland. But by the time we get to Sunday, we're looking at some slightly cooler air spreading into most parts of the UK. But with that, the weather should become that bit dry with some sunny spells. So quite a cloudy weekend, certainly starting off with some showers, but by the time we get to Sunday, an improving weather picture. So finally, we've cleared the fog. It's just a cold day coming up tomorrow with those bitter winds coming up from the continent. Sophie.
Chris, thank you. A reminder of our main story this lunchtime. Donald Trump is to unveil his plans to build a wall with Mexico, stop refugees entering the US and tighten visa controls with predominantly Muslim countries. And the other main news today, Theresa May says she will publish her Brexit plan for Parliament's scrutiny after a climb down by the government. That's all from the BBC News at 1. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC News teams where you are. Bye-bye.